It was a weird year.
It was a very weird year. Yes, it was.
When you think back on 2020,
Yeah.
and particularly, I guess, sort of what COVID meant for the health service.
Yeah.
What are some of the words that come to mind?
A bit crazy. I mean, we went through. It was a difficult time. Absolutely. Staff outstandingness, I think, to adapt to change, because they had to go through some rapid change very quickly and change the way we did things so their ability to adjust, especially for the residents' safety, and that was what was all coming down to, was incredible. You know, they went above and beyond, I think, what you would have expected of staff to do in similar circumstances. So it was a new thing for all of us. It was something we'd never been through before, but you know, I think we can come through with our head held very high that, you know, we did very well.
Yeah.
And we got through.
Let's talk about that a bit more. How did it, you think back to the person you were, I guess, 12 months ago.
Yeah.
Do you feel, I'll ask you about the staff and the team in a minute, but you personally, have you changed?
I think it probably, you know, it was really stressful. When this all came out, I was sort of in the acting manager role, and so that was, you know, quite a stressful thing. I didn't sign on to say I'd, you know, start the Maddox Gardens out through a pandemic. So I learnt a lot in that period of time. I learned about staff resilience and my resilience, I suppose, to manage things. So in that respect, I think I've probably changed and become a little bit more, or sort of understanding, I suppose, of the needs of people, because everyone's needs are different. I can understand now what to do in a pandemic. I never knew that before, so I've learnt that very quickly. So in that respect I have, and I think having now, I think, a greater understanding of the healthcare needs through a crisis, and, you know, what we have to sacrifice to get through that crisis, I think, you know, is a big thing I've learnt as well. I don't think there's a day go by now that I don't look at that app to see how many cases, so it's really, yay, you know. We can come through reflecting, looking back now. I think, you know, at the time we're just so busy doing everything that we need to do that the department required of us that we had to fulfil. Looking back now, where we are now to then, I think we can all say, yay, that was all worth it, you know, and that's a real sense of achievement that we got through. We had no cases, you know, the residents all survived, we all survived. We had very little complaints from families not being able to visit and do everything they did. So, you know, yeah, I feel, I think, proud that we got through and we did so well, and, you know. Yeah.
What about personally? I've heard some people sort of talk about how it changed them personally, maybe in terms of how they feel about family or just priorities in life.
I think we appreciate now the simple things in life, and I certainly appreciate the simple things in life. You know, I had 2 children stuck in Melbourne that I couldn't see. You know, they've just come up this weekend, and it's been delightful to see them again. And, you know, we used to go out for coffee every weekend almost, and now we just appreciate sitting on the deck at home and enjoying a nice cup of coffee, which is probably not good for the cafes, but you know, I think we do appreciate just the very simple things in life nowadays. All the extra things don't matter anymore, you know, that being the busyness of going here and going there. Home takes on a new meaning, I think, and I think I really appreciate the time that we've got at home. Yeah, which, you know, is nice.
That's lovely, yeah. I remember back sort of February, March when it sort of started to really dawn on us what's happening. I noticed in the hallways, at least, certainly sort of fear, like, you know, maybe just a concern about the unexpected.
I think, yeah.
What did you sense in those early periods?
I think there was a lot of fear out there of the unexpected, and I think in the early days of this coming out, I had a lot of staff coming to me wanting, you know, to close the place down, to shut visitors all out, to exclude everyone coming in. You know, there was this, you know, public-private sector, I suppose, and the privates were shutting all visitors out and not allowing any visitors in, and we were very, guided by what the department was telling us to do. So there was a lot of fear out there from staff, scared that things would come in and run rampant. The news only tells you the bad news stories, so they were watching the news religiously, and it was all bad news. So they'd come to work with that fear that was going to happen here to us as well. So there was a lot of reassurance needed for staff that we were strictly following the department guidelines and we're doing everything that they told us to do, and that we couldn't.
And then what happened? How did that evolve? I certainly felt like an evolution, sort of gradually. Did you?
I think slowly but surely. It's constantly reassuring the staff, constantly talking to them, constantly looking at the guidelines, staying up to date. One day we were allowed, X amount of visitors, the next day that had changed. So we were constantly evolving and keeping that communication going with staff, keeping those numbers, down and not having things here, staff taking their temperatures and making sure they stayed away from work if they were unwell. All that was coming into play, and so as time went on and they could see that we were staying COVID free here and that things were in place and that we were putting strict things in place, they just felt more comfortable. We did close the entrances down to Maddox Gardens so people could only come in through one entrance, and they felt much more comfortable with that visitors couldn't just come in as they used to come in. So as it evolved, yes, people became a little bit more comfortable. I don't think we ever became complacent though. It was always there. It's something that we've just learnt to live with at the moment.
So there's obviously probably a wide range of things, but you mentioned the sort of closing the entrances so you could funnel people through the front door.
Yeah.
What were some of the other key sort of, structure and process or equipment changes that sort of helped?
Big changes were for the residents. Staff obviously wearing masks and face shields. That was a big thing for them, and they got used to wearing masks and face shields with all resident close contact. The residents themselves probably was the biggest change. They were used to all dining together in the dining rooms with 4 to a table, so we had to socially distance all the residents in their dining rooms so they could separate. So we had dining areas in the activities room and we had their main dining areas so we could distance them and keep them that 1.5 apart. They were used to doing activities together, so the residents would do group activities frequently, so again we had to socially distance those. So what they were used to doing totally changed. Again, lots of communication with the residents, and they all came on board really well, but we had to change the whole way we did things. And so I can remember days where the residents were all sitting outside their doors in the hallways and the activity staff were running up and down doing activities through the hallways with the residents sitting at their chairs in the doorways. So that changed, more outside things if we could, socially distance people outside when the weather was fine.
The
Anzac Day service, was different, for them, and we still had the wreath laying outside, but, it was different for them, and they were really good, actually. I don't think we had anyone, really object to any of the things. They understood the importance of socially distancing and changing the way we did things.
I can imagine there were some difficult conversations with families, maybe. How did you feel like the families were responding?
Very well. In general, very, very well. I think they certainly, because of the news and all what was happening in the nursing homes in Melbourne, it was very in your face, I suppose, the consequences if we didn't follow the rules. So they were, on the whole, very, very good. The government guidelines did allow us a flexibility around end of life for families, and so if we did have a resident that was end of life, we could allow more visitors in, and they were very grateful for that. So we did have a few residents that families we could let more members in, adhering to the the 1.5 with staff and all that sort of stuff. But I think if we didn't do that, it would have been probably a different scenario. But on the whole, families were very, very good. A little bit harder for some of our residents in Sutherland Lodge because, we did have to change visiting hours around, and often in the afternoon, they're not at their peak. They're better off seeing in the morning, so we had to adjust a few things there, but generally very good. How
about conversations with the residents about COVID? What did you feel like the vibe was from, obviously all the residents are different individuals, but...
I think they felt from my perspective anyway, they felt comfortable knowing that we were taking all the precautions that were taking, and so there was, you know, a lot of communication with them. You know, they understood why we were wearing masks and face shields when we got close to them. Masks all the time, but the face shields came in when we were having close contact with them. So there was lots of talk around that and why we had to do that. So I think they were very understanding, and you know, most of them were very, very accepting. You know, the main changes to them were, you know, around their lifestyle and their activities that they did and their dining experience. So, you know, they could still see people. They just kept their little distance from them. So generally, I think they were very accepting. And again, the alternative, if we didn't follow those rules, was very in their face with the news if they were watching any of the news stories. So I think they felt very comfortable that we were doing the right thing.
This is a question for me, but also maybe for people out there who might have any understanding of what happens in an aged care facility. Do the residents have to socially distance from each other, or are they considered members of a single household?
We try to socially distance them from themselves as well. Very tricky in Sutherland Lodge, where we've got residents that have a diagnosis of dementia, so they didn't understand. So that was tricky for staff, and then there's certain times that proved hard to do. But certainly with the other residents, we could socially distance those, and they were most of the time very good with that. Yeah.
You spoke about communication being important. What was the communication like with residents? What did that look like? Was it just one-on-one informal conversations, or was it
lots of informal conversations? The residents have weekly resident meetings, you know, and forums, so there was a lot of communication in those forums too of what we were doing. And you know, when I was in that acting role, and certainly I think it's been continued on now with the aged care manager, would go in and give updates to the residents after they were happening. So lots of, you know, mostly informal talk, but there was that formal process where they could chat at the resident forums as well.
It's amazing how if you just tell people what's going on, they can deal with it regardless of how difficult it is.
Absolutely. I think if they're informed and they're knowledgeable, knowledge is power, and they totally get it. Yeah.
So we're coming towards the end of the year, and I guess, you know, New Year's and Christmas is sort of time you look back and reflect on what you've gone through. Thinking back on your work and your team and the staff over there, how do you feel about them?
Oh, proud as punch. Yeah. They've done really, really well. They've done extremely well in difficult circumstances, and at no time did the resident care suffer because things just took a bit longer. They just worked that little bit harder, you know. So very, very proud of the team. They are a brilliant lot of people, and someone that I'm very comfortable saying that they could care for someone I love, because, you know, they do an excellent job, you know, and they did. They looked after the residents beautifully, and the care didn't suffer, you know. They just went above and beyond. So very proud of them.
Do you think some of the things, that's a lovely answer, thanks Carolyn. Do you think this, maybe on this final question I think, are there any, do you see maybe that the future will look different now? You know, will this have changed this? Yeah,
I'm thinking there probably will be. You know, with what we've done this year, a few years ago, we went through an awful flu season, which was terrible for aged care. You know, the flu did hit very badly. So I think moving forward that, you know, the social distancing and the mask things this year have meant that we've had a really good flu season and we didn't have much flu around. So I can see probably things will be a little bit different in the future in regards to, you know, close contact with people. How that's going to look like, it's a bit hard to say. Hopefully it won't be masks forever. We're all hoping to work one day without a mask on, but it's worked, and we just do what we have to do to keep people safe. So, you know, I'm all for whatever we need to do, we have to do. But yeah, I think the space in healthcare is probably changed for a while anyway, you know, but, you know, that's okay. It needed to, maybe, and, you know, this has been, you know, a good example of, you know, when we do the right things, we've come through, and we've come through really well. So, you know, I think Victorians can be very proud of themselves, really. Yeah.